Road trip.
Okay. It sounds like we have somebody's speaker on. Thank you. Just want to note that we do have a quorum now. President Peterson, would you like me to get started?
Yes, please.
All right, thanks. Real quick before I start the recording, just a reminder to please keep your computers muted and to keep yourself muted on Zoom as well. We'll just be using the gooseneck mics today and the cameras in front of you. So with that, I will go ahead and start our recording.
All right, good morning. I would like to call to order the work session for the Metro Council on June 4th, 2024. Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. Councilor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councilor Lewis.
Present.
Councilor Simpson.
Present.
Councilor Wong will be a little bit late today. And finally, President Peterson.
Here, thank you. All right, before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
Yes, and I think I missed Councilor Nolan there. Apologies. Okay, and the safety video is done, President Peterson.
Thank you. Connor, just for future reference, that does not come through on the video, so.
Okay, thanks. We'll see what we can do about that.
All right, thank you. First on our agenda, Council, is an update to Metro Regional Waste Advisory Committee. The work session today is an update from WPES staff about the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. As you know, over the past few years, Metro as an agency and specifically this council have been working to create more opportunities to listen to industry, government, and community partners and increase transparency. I really want to thank Councilor Nolan and Councilor Lewis for co-chairing our recent fee setting committee. On behalf of the council, I'd also like to thank the diverse community members and stakeholders who participated in that committee for their time and dedication to improving our garbage and recycling system. From that group, we heard a call for ongoing collaboration and information sharing with partners and for a way to provide feedback throughout the budgeting process. Staff is here today to walk us through the proposed changes based on the stakeholder and community input that we got. Marta McGuire is here to kick it off, our Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Director, and I will have her introduce anybody else that she has brought with her. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Peterson. Good morning, councilors. It's wonderful to see you here this morning. Again, my name is Marta McGuire, and I'm Metro's Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Director, and I have here with me Rosalind Green, Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Strategic Initiatives Manager. As President Peterson shared, we are here today to share proposed updates to the Regional Waste Advisory Committee that respond to the recommendations from the Waste Fee Policy Task Force. These changes do require code amendments, and the proposed revisions are included in your draft packet. Today, we are seeking your input on the proposed changes with the plan to bring a resolution and code amendment later this month for council approval, incorporating any input or changes that we hear today. We have a short presentation and then most of the time reserved for discussion. And so with that, I will turn it over to Rosin.
Thank you, Marta. Good morning, President Peterson and members of Metro Council. As Marta said, my name is Rosalind Green. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Strategic Initiatives Manager for WPES. Happy Pride Month. I hope you visited the Pride Takeover in the lobby. In celebration, I'm wearing a little sparkle today. Counselor Lewis, I love your scarf. And I just love Pride Month, so just wanted to state that up front. Next slide. So today I'm here to present proposed changes to the Regional Waste Advisory Committee and ask for your feedback and approval. First, I'll explain what prompted the changes, which President Peterson touched on a little bit, share the recommendation, and describe how the changes would improve the committee. Next slide. So as you all know, Metro Council directed staff to convene the Waste Fee Policy Task Force this last winter. And the task force was created to provide recommendations to Metro Council to guide development of the fiscal year 24-25 solid waste fees. The task force approved several recommendations that were endorsed by Council in March of this year, as you recall, and today I'm here to highlight the accountability recommendations specifically made by the task force because that is what is prompting our recommendation today. Next slide. So the Waste Fee Policy Task Force was created to provide a very specific recommendation and was not designed to provide ongoing input long-term. However, their recommendation included requested actions to increase accountability in the solid waste budget and fee setting process to ensure increased transparency and oversight long-term. The task force called for greater transparency through ongoing collaboration and information sharing with public, private, nonprofit, and community partners by convening a diverse perspectives to provide feedback throughout the budgeting process. Naturally, since we already have a committee like that called the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, also known as RWAC for short, it was suggested that a way to address the need could be by expanding the scope and the committee representation of RWAC, and that is our recommendation we're bringing to you today. Next slide. So this slide shows the current composition of the committee seats, which totals 12 people or members representing community, industry, local governments, and DEQ. Just a quick little history lesson here. RWAC was adopted by Council in its current form on June 6, 2019. Previously, it was known as the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, or SWAC. And unlike its predecessor, RWAC includes greater representation of community members and helps advance progress towards Metro's racial equity objectives, as well as the regional waste plan goals. Next slide. So the Waste Fee Policy Task Force, as we also know, was chaired by Councilors Nolan and co-chaired by Councilor Lewis, and we felt this structure worked extremely well. And so this proposal includes changing the structure of the Regional Waste Advisory Committee to include a councilor chair and a councilor co-chair. We believe having Metro councilors chair this committee will help strengthen the connection and collaboration between RWAC and Council. And then the proposal also includes adding one transfer station representative, one material recovery facility representative, and one reuse organization for a total of 3 new seats. We're also seeking a slight code change to the criteria for the hauler seat. So it includes representation of a collection company as an option, and it's not limited to Oregon Refuse and Recycling Association or ORA, because it's right now limited to ORA, and we want it to also include potential representation of a collection company. So these changes would increase membership to better represent key garbage and recycling stakeholders by adding representatives from the garbage, recycling, and reuse sectors. Next slide. So the Regional Waste Advisory Committee is tasked with advising Council on implementation of the 2030 Regional Waste Plan first and foremost. This proposed changes include expanding the scope of the committee to advise Metro Council on the development and adoption of WPEZ's budget and fees throughout the process. And this is just a picture of the budget timeline, which we're all very familiar with. Next slide. And so this slide summarizes next steps if the recommendations were to pass. We're obviously here on June 4th to introduce the changes, and we'll be coming back both on June 13th and June 27th for approval. If the recommendation moves forward, recruitment for the open positions will take place between June and August, and the updated committee would begin in September. And I just want to note here that there will be 4 existing positions open for recruitment this fall. And if the proposed changes are adopted by council as they are recommended, we'll be recruiting for 7 total seats open for this September. Next slide. So in summary, this is the staff recommendation, direct staff to improve engagement and budget and fee development based on the Waste Fee Policy Task Force accountability recommendation to expand scope and membership of the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. Next slide. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time, and we'll open up for feedback and questions, and we would love to hear from you. Does council support moving forward with the proposed changes? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Counselors, any comments, questions, suggestions? I guess I just have a quick question. And that is on the elected officials. I thought that there had been a request for more mayors, but maybe I'm just not remembering that correctly.
That's a good clarification to make. So currently, as it's structured, it has 4 local government representatives, and it's up to the city to nominate who they would like to serve. So it is open to elected officials to share. We anticipate, given that this, with the proposed changes, that this may be chaired by a counselor as well as a counselor co-chair, that it would likely, local governments may elect to then place elected officials in place of administrators that are serving on there now. And so we intend to open that opportunity up to them with these proposed changes if they want to submit an alternative member.
Thank you. Counselor Nolan and then Counselor Rosenthal.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Good to see you. Thanks for all this good work. I think it's a really good reflection of the work that we did on the task force. I want to posit, though, I guess I'll ask a question and then, depending on the answer, may make a suggestion. The question is whether we've analyzed the proposed additional assigned memberships or descriptive memberships for their likelihood in resulting in a committee that reflects the racial diversity of the community, of the region as a whole. My shorthand is that about 35% of the people living in the metro region are BIPOC. How do you think this configuration will help us have roughly a parity in representation on the committee?
I would say that this is the most diverse committee that we've had to date, and in large part that was due to selecting 4 seats to represent communities of color. With the other seats that are there, there aren't any additional criteria in terms of how we select for those seats for the local government representatives and private seats.
I hear you, and that's actually a concern I have. When we don't intentionally do that, and I'm not talking just about WPES, but when it isn't something we intentionally aim for, we too often fall short. And particularly in my observation, when we leave it to local governments to name their own people, it seems that that's not a criterion that they use.
So if I may interject, most of the committees at Metro are appointed by the Metro Council president. And I think that every time that folks bring names to me, that they know that the council wants a diverse representation. And that's generally what we've been getting, is a very high diversity of folks, because we're trying to move in that direction, and only so many positions are open at a time. So we have had conversations over the last 6 years of centralizing that decision-making to the council office. And I would love to continue to have that conversation about how to make that happen, so that it is driven out of the council office and suggestions are taken from staff, and just flip that around. because that's really how it should be if I'm appointing. So would love to talk to you more about that. But I think the point is well taken.
And I just wanted to,
Madam
Oh.
Chair, I appreciate that, and I know the efforts going into it. Saying that that's what we're doing would help our partners know that we are crystal clear.
and Counselor Nolan, if I may, we do have 3 seats for communities of color existing on the committee, which is about 25% of the committee, close to 30, which you noted. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
And
Right,
the arithmetic
thank you.
is we're adding 3.
Yeah,
So the
right.
percentage declines,
Yes, gotcha.
absent deliberate
Yes.
recruitment.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Perfect, thank you. Counselor Rosenthal and then Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. Actually, this is probably a question for the chair of the committee. In item B7, or let's see, B10, when it says reuse organization, is that meant to limit it to just reuse organizations and not include recycling or source reduction organizations?
It was intentionally to focus on reuse organizations.
And we are the proposal includes adding a material recovery facility, which is a processor of recyclables. So just wanted to point that out.
Okay. And then one other comment I'll make is that B5 is so general as to be, it doesn't even specify that it's an individual. So I'm just wondering if some clarification there might be necessary. One suggestion would be low income. Another suggestion would be apartment dweller. Some would be, non-institutional, whatever.
Right.
Great, thank you. Counselor Lewis.
Sure, thanks. I am broadly very supportive of this move. I do think that every committee has 2 sides. It has the side that's written on paper and it has the side that's generated in practice and culture. And I would encourage us to, as much as we're thinking about what gets written down on paper, be thinking about the culture of this committee. There's obviously been some dramatic swings in the past of being extremely industry focused, being extremely community focused. I find this to be a little bit of a recentering. But the opportunity here for us not only to work within that spectrum of polarities, but also I would call it closeness to council. And I think it is important that we develop an intentional practice like we do with JPAC and MPAC of getting regular reports at our meeting, of understanding broadly within the entire council what's on the agenda and what the dynamic pieces are that we need to see coming through this committee. Because if we don't have that closeness to council, if it operates like it has over the past 5.5 years, where it's a little bit of a black box test at council, it serves no purpose because we're going to redo all the hard work at council level. So I appreciate the importance of getting it on paper first, but for me, it's the cultural and the connectedness to the council level policy that's critical.
I appreciate those comments. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I'll just put an exclamation point on that, and that I think that the council, because it is a chartered committee, would like it to operate as JPAC and MPAC. So if we could mirror what we've learned over the years, I think that would be a helpful start. So thank you for bringing that up, Counselor Lewis. Counselor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. I wanted to make sure that the co-chairs had the opportunity to voice their comments first. And again, want to thank them for their hard work and in supporting this process. And I want to voice my support for the recommendation. What I see is very clear, intentional approach to rebalancing some of the work that we've done over the last few years in terms of defining what we mean by industry and the different kind of groups that can inform Metro and the Metro Council. And I have to also add an emphasis to the connection to council and bringing that closer to us. for the time, for the 6 years that I've been on council, the RWAC or SWAC has felt like, a little bit distant, a little bit, specialized, and by this kind of reform package, essentially, I think will give us the opportunity to set things into motion in a different way. And I have to echo the sentiment that for an area of enterprise that's so significant for Metro with our rate setting, I'm hoping that this creates, similar to what President Peterson has been talking about for the last few years, kind of a utility mindset in terms of our engagement, in terms of our decision-making and formal recommendations to the council, in addition to the regional waste plan goals and all the other significant plans that we have in place and that we're developing. So again, just want to voice my support. I know that there is personally, when it comes to DEI and how we continue to do that, it's for me, it continues to be a lens and a culture that we built within our department for that representation. Making sure that it doesn't always come down to the numbers. It comes down to when people show up to the committees, and when they do get there, what's the level of support, the capacity building, the investment of training that we've made, because we are resetting the culture of this committee, but the nature of the decisions that this committee is going to have, there's a huge power imbalance from elected officials to potentially very wealthy people in the industry to people in the community that don't have, an army of staff or lobbyists that are continuing to keep them up to date on things. And so to me, that is where a lot of the work around DEI continue. I wanted to emphasize that work, that it's not just about getting people there, but it's about making sure we're successful in the retention and cultivation of thought leadership within the community. So I hope that I know that is a part of the way that WPES does its work, and I'm hopeful that we continue to find ways to elevate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, I'll just round this out with saying thank you. I think this is a good place to land based on the recommendations from the committee and from what you've heard over time with the council, to rebalance the viewpoints and get a broader perspective. So thank you so much, much appreciated. It really mirrors also kind of where the council's headed with staff on how to actually manage our entirety of our system. So again, thank you. I was going to say much appreciated again, but but it is times two. With that, thank you, both of you, for coming and presenting, and we look forward to seeing you when we go to adopt this. Okay, we'll move on to our next conversation, counselors. This is our time to follow up on the fiscal year 2024-25 budget. Budget amendments and notes. Counselors, last week you shared updates and additions to counselor budget amendments and notes. We will vote on those budget notes and amendments at our next meeting on June 6th. But today's discussion is our final opportunity to discuss those proposals as a group before the vote. We have some changes to the amendments and notes to review today, including a few new additions. I will ask each counselor to share their updates if there are any, but first, I'd like to call on Brian Kennedy, our Chief Finance Officer, to give a quick overview of the discussion we'll be having. And program staff are in the audience to help answer any questions that may arise during this conversation. So Brian.
Thank you, Council President Peterson, members of the council. I'm Brian Kennedy. I use he/him pronouns, Chief Financial Officer here at Metro. I'm just going to walk through at a high level the department amendments that you will also be considering on Thursday. And again, we have staff here to answer questions if you have specific questions. The department amendments, for the most part, don't make any significant changes to the budget. There is an increase of 1.25 FTE in finance. One FTE is adding a finance manager for the housing department. Historically, our housing function was part of planning. We had one finance manager for the planning department. That was a full-time job in and of itself. We now have a full housing department, and that workload is getting to the point where we need a new FTE for that. The quarter FTE is we're also transferring a position from the zoo into finance to support the financial operations of the zoo. But so it's a net increase of 0.25 and then a transfer from the zoo fund to the general fund. We also have a reduction of 3.6 FTE in Parks and Nature as part of our ongoing efforts to reduce their operating deficit. Parks and Nature is also moving to FTE from the operating fund to the bond, shifting those folks' work. Part of reducing the operating deficit in Parks and Nature, but then also prioritizing some of that bond work as well. And then there's also a fairly long list of carryovers of project budgets, for the most part, which are moving due to timing changes related to those projects. But there's no change overall to the scope of the budget, just a schedule change. So we need to move that budget from the current fiscal year to next fiscal year. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Or to call up any staff if you have specific questions about the department amendments.
President Peterson.
Yes, I see that. Counselors, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you, Brian. Much appreciated. I'm stuck on that today. Counselors, why don't we move on to budget amendments and notes that you're sponsoring? Counselor Lewis, would you like to update us on the amendments and notes that you have?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to start with an update that what had originally been a budget amendment for investment in capital projects with a screen for climate and the ability to be matched or funded through federal incentives is now a budget note that helps keep us within compliance of state budget law. And we will actually see those budget changes go to the specific funds and not just move within the general fund in the winter budget amendment period. So that's the biggest news from the four budget items that I put forward.
Counselors, any questions for Counselor Lewis?
Follow Brian's lead. I do not want my budget stuff to break budget law.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis, for being amenable, and I apologize that Oregon local budget law was not flexible enough to accommodate what you wanted to do in exactly the way you wanted to do it. So appreciate you working with us on that.
Thank you. Counselor Simpson, do you have any updates to your budget amendment?
I do not have any current updates.
Okay. Counselor Wong is not yet in attendance. Any other counselors with anything that they want to introduce on amendments or notes?
President Peterson,
Yeah.
raising my hand here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see that.
No, it's okay. I was raising my finger, but it wasn't really my hand. You're not in sense.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Counselor Gonzalez.
Great. Yeah. So at one of our last work sessions, Councilor Lewis had brought forward an amendment. And since then on around WPES, creating working with the staff around Hatfield Fellowship to do some work. Since then, we've come together to expand the scope of that amendment to include one-time funding to support reuse organizations in Greater Portland, focused on ongoing operations, essentially gap funding between now and the time that Marta and her team will be generating a long-term plan around how Metro finds ways to support the reuse sector as a part of a broader policy changes at the state level, and also matching up with many of our council goals. So you'll see in the packet, and it has been emailed as well, an amendment that is sponsored by Councilor Lewis and myself, identifying the funding. We have had meetings with the WPES team, and also engaged Brian Kennedy, CFO, in understanding budget implications, and we feel confident that the funding is there, it is available, and that we are able to therefore allocate this into one-time funding. And I guess essentially that's where I can leave it. If there's anything else that you want to add or any questions, so I don't muddy the waters with details that might not help. Counselor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I think it's really important to note kind of the two-part nature of this. We are coming with funds that we're intending the department to get out ASAP. So by end of calendar year, as we specified. And then also we're looking for a longer term structural ongoing funding of these organizations, and particularly tied to their ability to track tonnage that will be diverted from landfill. So that's another one of the criteria, not only need, because we know there are many organizations that are experiencing need, but also their ability to innovate or iterate how they're tracking their tonnage, so that in the long run, we can sustainably fund reuse through also tracking tonnage diversion.
Great, thank you all. I don't think Councilor Wong is there yet, and I don't think there's been any changes to his proposal. So we certainly will have another opportunity to talk about it at the June 6th meeting. Councilors, we will be going through each one of those notes and amendments in turn and voting on them separately, just so you know that's how we will operate when we get there. With that, seeing no other hands raised and no questions for Brian Kennedy, we will move on. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
We'll move on to Chief Operating Officer Communications.
Thank you, President Peterson, and good morning, Council. Just an update that we continue to have, I think, productive conversations with our county partners regarding potential recommendation for you all on funding for affordable housing. So I'm happy to update you in detail at any point or in our normal check-ins. But we have meetings scheduled out over the next several weeks. We also have a work session scheduled for you on, I believe, June 11th, where we'll be going into detail on all the feedback that we've received so far on all the various channels. So please let me know if there's anything specific that you'd like to see there. Otherwise, we'll just kind of give you the full update on everything. And then looking toward a final recommendation at the beginning of July. So let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to it. Councilor Communications, councilors, anything to add? Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. Yeah, just a heads up, I'll be sending an email to council regarding one of the amendments that I worked on for our current fiscal year that has some clarity around the economic development organizations that we sponsor through our council fund. And just expect to see an update. It has to do with some economic development organizations based in different parts of the metro area that essentially, due to the pandemic, their operations changed, and therefore we needed to identify new organizations. We've gone through that process. Councilors have identified, and essentially there's an email that explains at great length the steps that were taken. But I want to give folks a heads up since we're in the spirit of budget and all that. Second, also today is the first day of the transportation statewide spectacle that we're going to be a part of here, in engaging with our statewide leadership and legislators, and letting them know our priorities here. We have my understanding is there's a tour today, a roundtable, and a period for public testimony. Have to thank the government affairs staff and the planning staff for really working hard to keep us up to date on details. And I believe the council received the general update from Jenna last week around some of those developments and the representation that the council and JPAC will have today in voicing our general thoughts around the priorities for the metro area. So looking forward to that, and we'll have more updates, I'm sure, on Thursday.
And a big thank you to Counselor Lewis for stepping in for me since I am sick. Appreciate that. Counselor Simpson and then Lewis.
Thank you, President Peterson. I just want to update the council. Yesterday, the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee met at the Expo Center yesterday at Hall A for a storytelling event. It was very powerful. I want to thank our co-chairs, Lynn Fukujama and Councilors Ed Washington for hosting and having us there. And also I want to thank our staff, Paul Slyman, Katie McDonald, and Jovian, and whoever else I'm forgetting for pulling that together, because that was a very powerful event to listen to folks who experienced internment at that site and shared their powerful experiences. It was something to listen to, but also to sit in the room and really have to sit with as we deliberate how we want to do that. And I also want to thank Councilor Lewis for joining and being there as well. And Councilor Rosenthal, sorry about that, sir. If y'all want to tap in and say a few words about that, I'll leave that open for you all too as well.
It was remarkable. Our staff did a fantastic job. Community showed up, really impressed by our ability to go between some really relaxed, good community connection and some really hard stories. And this space is incredibly challenging to work with, which is why it is not often used for the type of presentation we used it for. So the staff did a lot to make that accessible, and there were only minor audio issues, and well done all.
Yeah, and I just want to weigh in. I thought I was there for an hour and able to see a great variety of the storytelling going on. And I think ditto to everything that everybody has said. It is a difficult space to be in, not just from the way it's set up and but from its history and what has taken place. As one of the speakers said, place matters. All right, Counselor Lewis and then Counselor Rosenthal was there and disappeared. All right. Go ahead,
Sure.
Counselor.
Thank you, colleagues. Wanted to report back last Tuesday, a week ago. I was mobile for the last few minutes of the meeting because I was on my way to the Willamette Falls Locks, where I was able to host several of our state legislators as well as representatives from 3 federal offices for a tour of the locks. It was almost a perfect day. We only got rained on as we walked up the stairs leaving, but lots of good conversation with our partners and potential continued funding relationships there. Also wanted to report with other news coming from the area of Willamette Falls. As you know, I sit on the board of the Willamette Falls Trust in an ex officio capacity. And today we announced our hire of the new Andrew Mason, who is a name familiar to many of us, former Governor Kate Brown. So look forward to seeing her around and as a collaborator in our efforts. Thanks.
An exciting moment. Thank you. Counselor Rosenthal, and welcome Counselor Wong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick shout out to Matthew Rochford and the Expo crew for what they did with the cultural event yesterday, and for his proactive involvement in getting more recognition for the Vanport Mosaic and other activities that recognize the 3 very important cultural events or cultural histories that this area of Portland represents. One is the indigenous communities, the other one is the Japanese incarceration, and the third one is the Vanport flood, which affected a lot of people who were working and affected basically all 3 groups. So I appreciate his efforts and his concerns.
Thank you. Counselor Wong, welcome. I don't know if you have anything, if we could just go back for a second on the budget notes. If you have any updates for us on your budget note or amendment, if not, that's fine. But if you have something else you want to talk about, this would be the time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam President. And thank you all for having such a expedient meeting. I'm sorry to have missed it. I was actually presenting to the Grant Makers of Health annual conference on healthy philanthropy. They're having their annual conference at our own OCC happening right now. So I was able to talk to basically the region or the nation's main climate funders, and we went on a little tour of North Portland, Cully, and 82nd Avenue. So let folks know who was here at our conference center.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, counselors, seeing no more hands raised, we will adjourn this council work session until our next regular meeting, which is scheduled for this Thursday, June 6th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. Thank you so much. Have a great